Welcome to Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic. I'm your daily guide for understanding today's headlines, Michael O'Fallon. Whether you have a dog or know friends that have a dog, you can remember those days when you first brought your newfound pet into your home. You remember the early days when you thought you could train up your German Shepherd, your Australian Sheepdog, your French Poodle, or your American Bulldog, and because of your efforts and your training, your beloved pooch wouldn't pee on the carpet, or chew up your shoes, or nip at friends when they were coming over to visit. You eventually came to the point where you knew for you and your new pet to be able to coexist, you were going to have to take your dog to obedience training. And sadly, you'd realize that maybe you would have to have the pet stay at obedience training for a few weeks because just a few visits a week wasn't doing the job, because the dog would slip back into its old ways. So you'd make the decision to send your unruly pet, stuck in its ways, to a few full weeks of true taskmasters who would not put up with the dog's disobedience. The dog would have to conform to the obedience training's new ways, or else. With the trainer showing strong, immovable, non-negotiable dominance over the pet. And then, after a few weeks, you would need to go and be with the dog for continued obedience training, making sure that you knew that you couldn't give in to the dog's old ways. Immediate obedience and stern new ways of acting and reacting to the dog had to be employed at all times for this to work. For the dog to know that there was no going back to his old ways. There was no going back to normal. What was learned by both your dog and you in obedience school was the new way. And now you might be understanding what has been going on in your world, in your nation, and your state over the past year and a half. Your president, prime minister, governor, or maybe your mayor has taken you to obedience training. You have just finished a year and a half of obedience training, and it's going to continue. Because now you have lost your rights. You have accepted precedence. Because you are now pets of the supranational state, and you must obey. And just like how you would punish your dog by not taking him to the beach or to the park if he was a bad dog, or maybe you would give him a treat if he was a good boy, you are now pets of the new totalitarian tyrants. And when they tell you to stand down or mask up, or when they tell you it's time to get your shots, you obey. And discipline is employed by your masters if you disobey. And all of a sudden you start to realize that we're all losing our humanity. That we've become pets of the state. You've also become the pets of the social media overlords. And the really, really bad stuff, folks, hasn't even started yet. If you were in Australia, or in New South Wales in particular, people were told that they may not travel into other Australian territories without permission. They may not remove their masks to talk to one another. Australians must continue to move to their specified destination without stopping and without chatting. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern put the nation on a 3-day lockdown Tuesday after a single case of community-spread COVID-19 was confirmed in Auckland, the country's largest city. And with this new case, New Zealand's first, by the way, in 6 months, it was diagnosed in a 58-year-old man who was just visiting, though it is not known how he contracted the virus that causes COVID-19. Prime Minister Ardern ordered a complete lockdown and shutdown of New Zealand over the one single case. So she put stay-home orders in force. She stated that only essential businesses will allow fully masked individuals, regardless of their vaccination status, to be able to come in on their appointed hours. And of course, she said, no talking to anyone. This isn't the time for that. You might spread the virus. Obey, heal, submit. And of course, not to be outdone by the tyrants across the sea, Joe Biden, the scriptreader who has put our entire nation at risk, destroyed any positive efforts in Afghanistan, and who has been inviting millions of unvetted, untested people into the United States and busing them across the nation, said this, quote, as we head into the school year, remember this. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, says masks are critical, especially for those who are not yet vaccinated, like our children under the age of 12, end quote. He then also berated Republican governors who had banned mask mandates for schools in their states, in other words, saying that people actually have rights and that people need to be responsible for their own health. Biden continued, quote, we're not going to sit by as governors try to block and intimidate educators from protecting our children, end quote. So this man, who is saying that he's going to follow the advice of the CDC, which has been absolutely all over the contradictory map, is now going to make another mandate, and he's going to say we need to protect our children. And of course, it's always the thought of protecting the children that usually ends up leading to tyranny, especially when what's being proclaimed by the tyrant is completely unscientific. And after nationalizing rental property across the United States, is now about to nationalize every other business in the United States to do his bidding. In particular, by the way, the travel market. And if governors push back and won't obey, if they won't be good dogs, then he will use the corporate sector to put the squeeze on the general population, push everyone into a corner, make everyone obey, demand obedience, or else you can't live in the brave new world. Let me ask you a question for a second. Because we're going to be getting into some of this in the next few weeks, by the way. Do you think that all of this stops at the latest vaccine? Are you that naive? Have you not been listening to me over the past 4 years on the causes of things and all the conferences and all the speeches that we've given? This will soon go digital and trackable. And it won't be just about your vaccine status, because you have to obey. This is obedience training. And of course, they will tell you that you must take the vaccine after vaccine and accept all this traceable and trackable technology so you won't cause any harm to anyone around you. You must obey, because you are all now pets. What are you going to do when they tell you that what you believe and what you think is dangerous? When they tell you that your faith and your ideology can no longer be tolerated because you are a danger to other people and you have to stop thinking the things that you think? Well, you're going to have to obey because you're now pets. What will you do when they tell you that you can't drive your car anymore, that you have to use the automated and satellite-controlled vehicles that avoid all wrecks in the future? When they explain that for you to keep on driving means that you are the danger. You are the threat. Because those of you who don't just sit and let AI, artificial intelligence, do the driving for you, are a threat to other people. Like a bad dog that got outside of his fence. That's you. You must obey because you're a pet now. This is all coming. But here's one thing I do suggest. Don't be the beaten and cowardly dogs like New Zealand is. Don't be the beaten and cowardly dogs like those in New South Wales, Australia are being. Here's what we all have to do. Now is the time to stand. Now is the time for civil disobedience. Now is the time to take your nation back. Now is the time to take your liberties back. Because remember, to them, you are no better than dogs. And ladies and gentlemen, we are not pets. We are human beings made in the image of God, and we have no masters but God and God alone. I'm Michael O'Fallon, and I will see you tomorrow on Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic.
Thank you.